My granddaughter's secrets weren't whispered in the dark. They were drawn in jagged crayon on cheap construction paper. It started at Sunday dinner in the house I once owned, at a table that no longer felt like mine. It hurts when I sit. Lily leaned into me, her voice a fragile wisp of sound against the clatter of silverware and forced laughter. Her plate of roasted chicken and potatoes sat untouched, a cold monument to her anxiety. Beneath the heavy oak table, her small legs were clenched together, a desperate attempt to hold herself. In her eyes, a deep hazel, so much like her mother's, searched my face for an answer to a question she didn't know how to ask. In that instant, a silent alarm went off in my soul, a frequency only I could hear. I gently placed my fork down. "Clara said," I announced to the table, my voice calm but clear, "that it hurts her when she sits." Cassandra, my son's wife, let out a sharp theatrical laugh. Dressed in a silk blouse that was too thin for the Pennsylvania autumn, she waved her wine glass dismissively. "Oh, for heaven's sake," she scoffed. "She's 6, Clara. She's probably just constipated from all the junk food you sneak her. Honestly, the drama." The others chuckled along, a weak chorus of agreement. Even my own son, Mark, offered a strained smile before his eyes retreated to the glowing screen of his phone, his refuge from anything resembling conflict. Lily's face crumpled. She looked down at her lap, her silence a slammed door. I placed a hand on her back, but her small body went rigid beneath my touch. "She said she is in pain," I repeated, my gaze locking with Cassandra's. She rolled her eyes, a gesture of profound impatience. "Not everything is a cold red, Clara. Kids get bumps. They exaggerate for attention. Maybe you should stop filling her head with your morbid stories. We're trying to have a pleasant family meal." "I'm not imagining things," I said. Mark cleared his throat, a sound like gravel grinding. "Let's just get through dinner, okay, Mom?" "Exactly," Cassandra declared, raising her glass as if for a toast. "Let's get through dinner without one of your grim little episodes. You think we invited a ghost to the table. You barely speak unless you're turning a simple comment into a federal case." I fell silent. I was used to it. The jabs, the condescending tone, the way they treated me like a piece of antique furniture they were obligated to dust off for holidays. I lived in the finished basement of the house my husband and I had bought 30 years ago. I cooked in the kitchen that still had my initials faintly visible on the inside of a pantry door. But I was no longer family. I was an obligation, a ghost at my own table. Only Lily saw me. Only Lily would creep down the basement stairs in her fuzzy pajamas, her sketchbook clutched in her hand, and ask me to read to her. Only Lily would rest her head on my lap while I knitted her. Her small presence, a balm on my lonely heart. Later that evening, after the plates were cleared and dessert was served, as if nothing had happened, I watched her from my armchair. She wasn't sitting on the couch with the others. She was kneeling on the rug, her coloring book open, but her crayons untouched. I saw it in the hunch of her shoulders, the way she flinched when Devin, Cassandra's boyfriend, a man with no blood ties but who moved through the house with an unnerving proprietary air, reached over her to grab the TV remote. My skin prickled with a cold dread. "Lilybug," I called softly, "want to come downstairs with me? We can finish the book about the brave little knight." She didn't look up, but gave a single, almost imperceptible nod. That night, curled on the worn floral sofa under the dim basement light, I didn't read. I just held her as she pressed her face into my side. Just before she drifted off, she whispered, "One more thing." Words that would become the key to a lock I didn't yet know I had to pick. "He told me if I tell anyone, they'll put you in a home for old people." My hand froze in her hair. "Who told you that, baby?" But she was already pretending to be asleep, her breathing shallow and uneven. I sat there in the humming silence of the old furnace, a cold fear seeping into my marrow. I had suspected something was wrong for months. The sudden bedwetting, Cassandra mocked, the nervous tantrums, the way Lily would go silent whenever Devin entered a room. Now this. I looked at the precious child asleep on my chest, the last piece I had of my own lost daughter, Rose, and I knew with a certainty that eclipsed all my fear that I had to do something. I had already buried one child. I would not lose my grandchild to the monsters living upstairs. She's just waiting to die, but she wants to do it as loudly as possible. Cassandra said it with her back to me, examining a bottle of wine as if my existence were a mere footnote to her evening. She never looked at me when she delivered her cruelties. It was a performance for the room, her malice disguised as casual observation. I stood at the kitchen sink, my hands submerged in warm, soapy water, the ghost in my own home. This was the same kitchen where I'd baked birthday cakes for Rose, the same floor I had scrubbed on my hands and knees. Now I just listened as Cassandra's voice slithered across the tiles. "Honestly, why is she still here? For nostalgia?" she continued, pulling a dish towel from a hook. No one answered. They never did. This was my house. My name was on the deed. After my husband passed, I kept it running. After the car accident that took my daughter Rose, I turned the guest room into the nursery for Lily. I was the one who painted the walls a cheerful yellow. I was the one who rocked that baby to sleep while Mark drowned his grief in overtime and Cassandra disappeared on grief weekends that looked suspiciously like spa getaways. My move to the basement was supposed to be temporary, just until they got back on their feet. But they never did. They simply expanded, colonizing the space until I was relegated to the foundation. My furniture was moved to the garage to make way for Cassandra's Peloton. The photos of Rose were replaced with framed prints of abstract art. I became an afterthought, a tolerated inconvenience. Cassandra's animosity was palpable. She saw me as a drain, a living embodiment of a past she wanted to erase. I was useful only because I provided free childcare, and even then, I was treated with a thinly veiled contempt. Every attempt I made to connect with Lily was intercepted. "She's fine," Cassandra would snap if I mentioned how Lily flinched when Devin was near. "She's just shy. Don't project your own trauma onto her." She hissed when I brought up the nightmares. "Just because you couldn't save your daughter doesn't mean you get to play amateur psychologist with mine." One night, I stood at the bottom of the stairs hearing Lily's muffled sobs from her bedroom. Cassandra had locked the door from the outside. "She needs to learn to self-soothe," she had announced. But I knew that cry. It was the sound of real fear, the same choked sob Rose used to make after a fight with the boy who claimed he loved her. My blood ran cold. They said I was getting old, forgetful, senile, they whispered, about options and care facilities. But I wasn't confused. I was watching. At dinner, the next day, Lily was a ghost. She picked at her food, her eyes downcast. When Devin's hand brushed her shoulder as he reached for the salt, she went rigid. No one else seemed to notice. I reached across and gently touched her hand. She didn't pull away from me. "Lily," I whispered, "do you want to draw for me after dinner?" She gave a slow, solemn nod. Later, in the quiet of the basement, she handed me a drawing. It was made with a black crayon, the lines thick and angry. In the center of the page was a small girl with no mouth. Standing beside her was a tall, looming man, his face a complete blank. The drawings became her voice. The cheerful suns and smiling flowers disappeared, replaced by a suffocating darkness. She drew a house with no windows, the doors all bolted shut. She drew the faceless man again and again, his hands depicted as long red talons. One morning, I found a drawing she'd left on my pillow. It was the little girl with no mouth curled in a corner. Above her, in wobbly first-grade script, she had written, "Don't tell no one. No one believes Grandma." My hand shook as I folded the paper and hid it inside an old cookbook. I started watching more closely, my focus a laser in the fog of their denial. I tried to show Cassandra one of the drawings, the one of the windowless house. "She's crying for help," I pleaded. Cassandra glanced at it, her expression unreadable, and then tore it in half. I unzipped the back of her worn stuffed bear Barnaby. Inside, I placed a tiny digital voice recorder I'd bought months ago, a desperate purchase born of a suspicion I hadn't wanted to name. I had never used it until now. Each night, I would talk to her, my voice a low, soothing murmur. I never pushed. "Does the man in your drawing still come to your room?" I'd ask. A nod, sometimes a whisper, "Only when Mommy's not home." Another night, as she stroked Barnaby's ear, she whispered, "He has no face because he told me I'm not allowed to see it." And then finally, the name. Devin is the shadow. Of course I knew. I had known in my bones. But hearing her say it, her small voice cracking, felt like a shard of ice lodging itself in my heart. I kept recording, collecting the pieces of her broken silence. Then I called Arthur Jennings. He had been my late husband's best friend and our family lawyer, the one who had tried to help me fight for custody of Lily after Rose died, a battle I had tragically lost to Mark and his new, charming wife. I met him in his dusty book-lined office and handed him a USB drive. I said, "From Lily." He listened, his face growing grimmer with each passing second. When he heard the clip of Lily whispering, "He says if I tell, they'll put you in a home," he finally looked up, his eyes blazing with a cold fury. "We can build a case, Clara," he said, "but we need to know who this man really is." What Arthur uncovered chilled us both. Devin Mitchell, 37, a string of temporary jobs, and a pattern of moving in with single mothers. 2 years ago, in Ohio, a similar report had been filed: child sexual abuse. The case was dropped. The witness, the child's mother, suddenly withdrew her statement after receiving a large, unexplained cash deposit in her bank account. And the police report noted a key detail. The child victim had repeatedly drawn pictures of a tall man with no face. "Clara," Arthur said, his voice grave, "this might go beyond him. If Cassandra knew, if she protected him—" "She did," I said, my voice flat. I showed him Lily's latest drawing, the faceless man, the girl in the bed, and a woman standing beside them, her back turned to the scene. Lily had labeled the woman Mommy. Arthur closed the file. "We build the case quietly. We collect everything. We make sure they never see it coming." That night, I tucked Lily into her small bed in the corner of my basement room. "Grandma," she whispered, her eyes wide in the dim light, "when he hurts me, it makes me forget how to draw happy things." I swallowed past the lump in my throat. "You don't have to draw happy things right now, sweetheart," I said, my voice cracking. "You just have to keep drawing the truth. Grandma is listening." The moment I saw Cassandra in the basement doorway, her face contorted in a triumphant sneer, holding a printout of my email to Arthur, I knew the time for quiet collection was over. The storm had broken. "You think you're so clever, you manipulative old parasite," she hissed, "spying on my family, sending your little horror stories to a lawyer." Devin appeared behind her, a silent, hulking shadow. He stepped down the stairs, his eyes flat and cold. I backed away, clutching one of Lily's drawings.
I know what you're doing, I said, my voice shaking but firm. You're not going to talk to anyone ever again, Devin said, and then he moved. I barely saw the blur of his hand before pain exploded behind my eye. I crumpled to the concrete floor, my head striking the metal frame of the daybed. They didn't drag me. They simply took my phone and my purse and shoved me into the small, dark storage closet under the stairs. I heard the deadbolt slide home. You want to play detective, Grandma? Cassandra's laugh was a cruel, sharp thing. Fine, you can rot in there until we figure out what to do with you. I pounded on the door, but it was useless. Upstairs, I heard Cassandra scream, "Where's Grandma?" And Cassandra's sharp reply, "You cry one more time and you'll end up right where she is." I lay in the suffocating dark, the smell of mildew and old paint filling my lungs. My head throbbed. Hours passed. Then I heard Cassandra on the phone upstairs, her voice loud and excited. "Yes, we leave for Cabo on Thursday. A whole week, thank God. This place is cursed." They were going to leave me here to die. My time had run out. Feeling my way through the dark, my hand brushed against an old tin lunchbox, one that had belonged to Rose. I pried the rusted lid off with a piece of bent metal. From inside, I sliced a line across my forearm. It wasn't deep, but it was enough. I dipped my fingers in my own blood and began to write on the cold concrete wall. Arthur, help, Lily, Devin. If anyone ever found me, I wanted them to know this wasn't an accident. But in the end, it was Lily who saved me. 3 days after they locked me away, Cassandra dropped a quiet, hollow-eyed Lily at school during art class. Lily walked up to her teacher's desk and handed her a folded piece of paper. The teacher, a young woman named Miss Albright, unfolded it. It was a drawing of a house. Downstairs in a small dark box was a stick figure labeled Grandma. Upstairs, a larger faceless figure held the hand of a crying girl. In the corner, in red crayon, was a single word, help. Miss Albright didn't hesitate. By noon, Child Protective Services and a sheriff deputy were at the school. By 4, Arthur had been called, and by midnight, while Cassandra and Devin were celebrating their escape at an airport bar, the police were at the house with the warrant and a locksmith. They found me, barely conscious in the dark. They found Lily's sketchbooks. They found the voice recorder. And on Devin's laptop, they found the final sickening proof. A hidden folder filled with videos of Lily, taken through a pinhole camera drilled into her bedroom wall. The courtroom felt cold, a place bleached of all warmth and color. I walked in with a cane, Arthur at my side. Across the room, Cassandra was performing a masterclass in theatrical sorrow. Devin sat beside her in an orange jumpsuit, shackled and smirking. When the judge called me to the stand, I didn't speak of my own terror. I spoke of Lily's. I held up the drawings, one by one. I read the transcripts from the recordings, Lily's tiny whispered voice filling the silent courtroom. "You drew you without a face," I said, looking directly at Devin, "because she was too terrified to do you one. You thought no one would believe a child. You thought no one would listen to an old woman. You were wrong." I held up the last drawing, the one with the single word scrawled in red. "She couldn't scream," I said, my voice ringing with a strength I didn't know I possessed. "So she drew, and I am her voice." Devin Mitchell was sentenced to life in prison. Cassandra received 25 years for conspiracy, child endangerment, and obstruction of justice. As they led her away, she screamed at me. She was lying. You turned her against me. I met her gaze one last time. "No," I said. "You did." The judge granted me permanent guardianship. We left Pennsylvania and never looked back. Our new beginning smelled of cinnamon, old books, and Vermont rain. With the restitution money and the last of my savings, I bought a small, struggling bookstore in a quiet mountain town. We named it The Next Chapter. Every morning, I baked muffins and scones in the tiny kitchen in the back. Lily would sit at a small table by the window drawing. The faceless men and windowless houses were gone. Now she drew sunrises and puppies and a little girl with bright red boots holding hands with an old woman in an apron. One afternoon she brought me a new drawing. It was a picture of us standing behind the counter of our bookstore. The sun streamed through the front window, and we were both smiling in bright, confident letters. At the top, she had written, "Grandma listens." Tears stung my eyes. "It's beautiful, sweetheart," I whispered. "Can I hang it up?" She beamed, a full, genuine smile that reached her eyes. We taped it to the wall behind the register, a declaration and a promise. That night, I thought of the woman I had been, crouched in the dark writing a desperate message in her own blood. I thought of how close we had come to vanishing. Some truths are whispered so quietly the world can't hear them unless someone is willing to listen with their entire heart. Lily still has nightmares some nights. So do I. But we built a world where the darkness doesn't follow us past dawn. And on the wall of our little bookstore, her drawing hangs as a testament not to what we escaped, but to the chapter we built together. A reminder that the quietest voices, a child's crayon, a grandmother's love, can sometimes be the most powerful of all.